What up, YouTube? Welcome back to Skepticus. This is your boy, Adam of NOLA. I'm going a little off the cuff today. I don't have any specific script, just a few talking points I want to hit. So just going to be talking a bit extemporaneously. The overall topic that I'm addressing is purpose and meaning of life, especially as it applies to theism or Christianity versus atheism. Now, I know that may sound a bit ambitious. I'm not going to really solve all those problems for you or answer all those questions. I don't know if I could do that in 10,000-page philosophy books. Not that I'm qualified to do that anyway. But I've been seeing a lot of content on YouTube primarily. As you can imagine, I tend to monitor Christian podcasts and other podcasts and atheist channels, etc. So, I don't know, I start to see trends or sometimes weird consistencies from one video to the next. I don't know if they mean anything or not, but in particular, it seems like I've been seeing more content than usual that has to do with this question of not just what is the meaning of life. Well, we all know what the answer to life, the universe, and everything is. That's 42. But the question is really the big problem, right? And we're not going to get into all of that. That's a bit too deep. But I see a lot of these videos that seem to imply that theism in general, religion in general, Christianity in particular is someplace that people go to or cling to for purpose, for meaning in life. And even to some extent, I've seen these inferences that young people are going back to church, they're going back to religion. I've mentioned in some other videos of mine that I don't know exactly how much of that is true or not. I find all of the surveys about our people going back to church or going away from church, they can be very ephemeral. They can be very hard to nail down because it seems like it depends on who's asking the question, when they're asking it, where they're asking it, who they're asking it to. I mean, there are so many variables. And in general, I don't know at any point in time if theism is growing or shrinking, if atheism is growing or shrinking, if Christianity in particular is growing or shrinking. And for the most part, to be honest, I don't really care. I don't see it like a horse race. I'm not trying to be the one with the winning side where there's more atheists than anyone. Yay. I don't care if I'm the last atheist on earth when I die. That matters not to me. So that being said, though, I have seen some of these videos. For example, a few months ago, you guys may have seen that I did a response video to Gavin Ortlund. He's a pretty well-known apologist, and Gavin was talking about atheism specifically in these very dire terms. His headline actually said that atheism is devastating and unlivable, and the video pretty much just started off with that ridiculous premise and went downhill from there. And I did a whole response video to that already. I'm not going to belabor all those points again. More recently, I saw a 3-hour video from a diary of a CEO. And this one got a lot of attention because it had Alex O'Connor in it. I'm going to assume you guys know who Alex O'Connor is. If you're on this channel, you probably know. He was speaking to a couple other people. One in particular is an apologist by the name of Greg Kokel, and there was some back and forth there. But the entire point of that discussion was the talking points were about meaning and purpose. And are people finding meaning and purpose? And are they going back to church or other places to find meaning and purpose, etc.? And that was really the whole catalyst of the conversation. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cover a couple basic points, key things that I think it's important to keep in mind. And then I'm going to give you an anecdote, an Adam of NOLA story. Whether it's helpful to you or not, I'm not sure. Hopefully it helps to illustrate my point, but we shall see. A couple key points that I want to get into before I hit my anecdote. First, I believe strongly, I think it's almost empirically provable that purpose or meaning, however you want to phrase it, your purpose in life or your purpose in this universe, always, by definition, comes from within. Now, I know that theists and Christians will scream, no, God gives you your purpose. Well, the fact is, in terms of how you live your life, you choose whether or not you accept this purpose that came from Yahweh. And of course, there are people who think that their purpose came from Allah, or that their purpose came from Vishnu, or that their purpose came from some other deity. So even though, of course, every practicing Christian probably believes on some level that their purpose is driven by their almighty God, that still doesn't mean jack shit if you don't believe in the God, or if you have not accepted the supposed purpose that this God has put upon you. So I would argue that purpose and meaning always has to come from within. It's not a question of, oh, if I'm an atheist, where do I get my purpose? But if I'm a theist, then okay, I am given a purpose. Now, you can be given a purpose by your church. You can be given a purpose by what you read in the holy text, and you can accept that as your purpose. And many people do. But I don't think that's the same as truly saying that your purpose came from the God. Now, I know I'm splitting hairs here a little bit. And if you're truly a theist, if you're truly a Christian, for example, you're just going to say, no, God is there and he's omnipotent and all-knowing and omnipresent and all the omnis, and he defined my purpose. And fine, I'm not going to argue you off that ledge. I couldn't if I tried. But ultimately, I'm telling you, that's your purpose because you have accepted it as such. I want to make that clear because sometimes there seems to be this discussion going back and forth from where do we find purpose? Where do we get our purpose? And ironically, I think that one of the biggest obstacles to finding purpose in life is always feeling like you have to go out somewhere and find it somewhere else, or you have to have it given to you by someone or something else, or that you have to find it under a rock somewhere, or you have to find it in the middle of the lines in the holy texts. And the more you take that approach, like it's a treasure hunt, I think the more likely you are, conversely, to have problems figuring out what your purpose even is. So with that semantic out of the way, whether you accept the purpose from your God or whether the God truly gave you your purpose, I will be the first one to tell you that a sense of purpose can absolutely come from religion. It can come from what we're told that God wants us to do here. We're supposed to be Christ-like, and we're supposed to worship him, and we're supposed to follow his laws. And once we die, apparently, if you've done everything right in this mortal coil, your purpose then will be to go to heaven for eternity, in which case you will also be worshiping him for eternity. There's other videos to do about that, but the point is that if that's your purpose and you embrace that and accept that, that's great. But purpose doesn't have to come from religion. For many people, it does. I'm not saying that there's necessarily anything wrong with that. And if you feel a sense of purpose from your religion, then great. Seriously. But it does not have to come from religion. For example, there are those who might see purpose as more like a karma and dharma sort of thing, like they are here to make the world a better place by putting out better energy. There are some people who may take a secular humanist perspective and say that my purpose is to further mankind and to make this place, this world, even if it's just a tiny bit, to make it a little better when I left than when I came in. And you could even just take kind of selfish joy and purpose in the things that you do while you're alive. You can take purpose in your relationships. You can take purpose in the activities that you do and in the initiatives that you undertake for whatever reason you undertake them. So you might see that as being fleeting. You might see that as being selfish. But my point is, purpose doesn't have to come from religion. Purpose can come from anywhere that you find purpose. But one thing I want to make very clear is that it is borderline silly to assume that religion gives you purpose and that those without religion have no purpose, or even more specifically, that Christianity gives you purpose and that those who are not Christians do not have purpose. Just like I said about religion, of course, you can feel like your purpose comes from your religion, but there are plenty of people who are Christians who are suffering from depression, who are suffering from feeling adrift, feeling like they don't have a place in this world. Being a Christian doesn't magically reduce any need you have for antidepressants or psychotherapy or any other self-help needs. Christianity might help some people with those things, and it may help you with those things. But there are absolutely Christians out there who are damn unhappy. There are atheists out there who are damn unhappy. There are people of every other religion who are damn unhappy. And we can flip it around and do the other thing as well. There are, of course, many Christians who feel a sense of purpose and are very happy in their Christianity and their faith. That's great. There are, of course, many people of other religions who feel a sense of purpose from those religions and are very happy. That's also great. And believe it or not, there are actually a lot of atheists who feel pretty happy and have a sense of purpose, yes, in what they're doing or how they're living. I'm going to go through that in a minute. But I want to make it clear that this dichotomy that apologists or just Christians in general sometimes try to paint about purpose equals Yahweh. And then if you don't have Yahweh, you don't have purpose. I mean, that's just so disconnected from reality. And it's so disconnected from the lives that billions of people are living all over the world every single day that it's truly laughable. And yet, sometimes I feel like there is very much this narrative put forth like, hey, you better be a Christian or you better stick with your Christianity, even if it's making you miserable, because the alternative to go to a different religion or to go to atheism is just outright miserable and desperate and unlivable and devastating. And that's just silly. I also want to point out that there is a significant difference between feeling lost because you've somehow lost the one true way versus feeling adrift because you've turned away from the only belief system that you knew or that you were raised in. In other words, your support system. Here's what I mean by that. If you're a Christian now and you were to leave Christianity, and I'm not advocating for that, I'm not trying to deconvert anyone or deconstruct anyone, but if you were to leave Christianity today, could you be sad about having left Christianity? Sure, you might be sad about it. I'm going to be frank. Even devout atheists will tell you that there sometimes are things about the church or the faith or the rituals or whatever that they miss. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's natural. If you were to leave the faith in which you were raised, let's say, or the faith in which you spent many years or decades, that's a relationship. That's a community. To leave that faith would probably, on many levels, be a bit jarring. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're feeling adrift because you left the truth, because you made a mistake. It just means that, well, this was my support system. My family is Christian. My community is Christian. My coworkers are Christian. And although you don't have to cut ties with these people, if you are no longer in that Christian camp, can it feel a bit isolating? Of course it can. Can it feel like, oh shit, what do I do now? Of course it can. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you made a wrong choice. Now, of course, you can go back too. You can always change your mind, right? But the point is that a lot of times, if we choose to leave a given faith, we may feel some remorse over that decision, not because we made the wrong choice, but because there are a lot of things that are tied up in that whole aspect of religion. And losing any of them can, for a while, feel very disorienting. Doesn't necessarily mean that you've made the wrong choice. It just means it can feel isolating. It's no different, really, than if you just pack up one day and move to a completely different city, maybe in a completely different country. If you packed up and went someplace where you don't even know the language, and a lot of people couldn't do that, but if you can, it can be incredibly rewarding, and yet it can also be scary as hell. And that's natural. That's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad idea to move to this crazy foreign city. It just means that some days you're going to feel like you're on an island, and that's natural. I think that this island feeling is probably exacerbated if you fully deconstruct, if you truly go from, let's say, Christianity to being an atheist. Of course, there are people who are Christians and they become Buddhists. There are Christians who become Muslims, even though Christian apologists like to act like these people don't exist. But the point is that people do go from one faith to another sometimes. It's not incredibly common, but it happens. There are Christians who convert to Judaism, usually for marriage purposes. But the point is, for those people, admittedly, they probably don't feel the same sense of being adrift, not knowing what their purpose is, not knowing what their meaning in life is, because they're just kind of swapping out one meaning that's been given to them for another meaning that's been given to them. Whereas atheism doesn't have a belief in God. It's not a belief system, despite what some people might try to say. It's not a worldview. It's just a not view. It's a not worldview. I like that idea, a not view. I think the next time someone says to me, oh, atheism is a worldview, or they say, oh, this is what I don't like about the atheism worldview, I'm going to say, oh, you mean the atheism not view? Because that's what atheism is. It's a not view, okay? So in that regard, if you were to deconstruct, not move from one religion to another, if you went from Christianity to being an atheist, for example, from a worldview to a not view, then it may be that you want to work extra hard at finding out what is the new thing that fills that hole, because atheism isn't going to fill that hole. I'll be the first one to tell you that. Christians will tell you, oh, that's a great reason why you shouldn't be an atheist, but atheism should just exist if you don't believe in the God. If you don't believe in the God, faking it is probably not a good choice, but just not believing isn't in and of itself purpose. It's not in and of itself meaning. So what do you do if you are in that spot where you've deconstructed and you're thinking, my purpose came from my religion, now I don't believe in that religion, so where does that purpose come from now? So I want to hit one more point before I get into my anecdote, my story time. A lot of times people associate atheism with nihilism. Although you can be an atheist and a nihilist, the Venn diagram is not a single circle. In fact, I would argue most atheists that I've ever met are not nihilists. And you can even be a nihilist and be a theist, like a Christian, although it's probably a little rarer because, again, religion tries to tell you what your purpose is. And a lot of people, if nothing else, begrudgingly accept it. Whereas with atheism, no one's telling you what your purpose is. And I have seen, and this didn't happen to me, but I've seen a lot of other testimonies online where people who deconstructed said that they went through periods of nihilism. One that comes to mind, great content creator, her name is Britt Hartley. She was a Mormon, and she talked rather convincingly and in a rather heartfelt way about the depression and the nihilism that she felt when she first left not just Mormonism, but she left Christianity and theism altogether and became an atheist. That doesn't happen to every atheist, but it does happen to some. I think that for the majority of atheists, this sounds a little dismissive, but it's often something like a phase because they're adrift. They've been in this system that told them what their purpose is. And now they don't have anything telling them what their purpose is. And I do understand for some people that can make you feel like, oh shit, what's the meaning of life? Is there a meaning to life? It can feel depressing. Again, this doesn't happen to every atheist, but it can. I don't have an answer for you as to how to dig out of that nihilism if you find yourself in that spot. But I will tell you that a lot of times it's more of a reaction to the environment that you were in, this structured environment of purpose and meaning where they're telling you why you're here. They're telling you what the afterlife will be. They're telling you what your goal is in life. And now no one's telling you. It's like being in high school where everyone's telling you what class to go to next. And then you get out of high school and it's like, well, you can get a job or not. You can be responsible or not. You can pursue higher education or not. I mean, you can go get a wife and kids or not. I mean, you can do whatever the hell you want within reason, but nobody is guiding you down that path. They're not telling you, now do this, now do this, now do this. You're kind of, well, you're usually heavily on your own, and it can be terrifying. So all that being said, I wanted to give you this story because personally, I feel like my life is overflowing with meaning every day. I mean that. I'm not just saying that as some kind of kitschy thing to sell my channel or to poke at the theists and say, see, I'm really fine. No, I don't lose a minute of sleep over what my purpose is in life or what's the meaning of life. I don't lay awake at night. I don't feel depressed or nihilistic in any way, shape, or form. I am overflowing on most days with joy. And before you chime in, I'm sure that I will experience tragedy in my life. I've had bad times in the past. And of course, when shit's really going bad, I'm not saying that I'm just giggles and candy every day, but assuming that something isn't crashing all around me, I'm usually pretty damn happy. I have no belief in the afterlife. I have no belief in heaven or hell. I have no belief in eternal justice, positive or negative. So how is it that I feel any sense of purpose or meaning in life? Shouldn't I be devastated? Shouldn't I be a nihilistic, depressed individual who hates God and hates the world and can't wait to finish all of this and put myself to sleep? Well, I'm not. I can't explain all of this to you in one video, but I did want to give you this story because I think this kind of anecdotally illustrates it in a nice little nutshell. How would you like to be one of my advisors? I'm using Skepticus's memberships as a way to allow you to have a voice in the content and the direction of this channel. I hope to see you in the membership pool, and I want to hear your voice in what Skepticus is doing going forward. 2 quick things to know about this, or 3, I guess. One is that I really have come to believe that philosophically, at least, for me, there is no such thing as the past, and there is no such thing as the future. Now, before you think I'm crazy, I'm not saying that the past didn't happen. I'm not saying that all of my memories from yesterday are just made up and that I suddenly poofed into the existence at this moment and that everything in the past is just ridiculous nonsense. No, I know the past happened, but from a functional, existential perspective, the past is nothing more than smoke. It is my cobbled together memories. It's my story that I tell myself about things that happened prior. That doesn't mean that the past isn't important to me. I have good memories. I love my memories just like everyone else does. I have tragic memories. I have happy memories, more happy than tragic for sure. I'm not saying the past didn't happen. I'm saying that as far as my existence is concerned, The past is a mental construct, and I find it incredibly healthy to keep that in mind. The future is also a mental construct. Now, again, just like I'm not telling you that the past didn't happen, I'm not telling you that the future won't come to be. I'm not telling you that the sun will not rise tomorrow. And I'm not telling you that sometimes we don't need to make accommodations for things that are going to happen in the future. But what I am saying is that just like the past is a mental construct, so is the future. In terms of my consciousness, in terms of what makes me me, the only thing that makes me me is now, right here. How does that manifest in my daily life? Well, there's this concept of being present, right? Being in the moment, understanding where you are and appreciating that. And that's how this manifests. Because I understand sometimes you can't help but worry about the future. You have big problems coming up you have to think about. But for the most part, all that worrying that you're doing about the future is a lot of anxiety and a lot of wasted mental energy. And even more so, any worrying that you're doing about the past, that's really wasted mental energy because you're never going to get that back. I mean, I guess I would argue if you had to worry about something, worry about the future. And sometimes it's unavoidable. I understand that. But in a normal daily life, when you're not facing tragedy, assuming that your life is at least good enough that you don't think you're going to be on the street tomorrow, etc., then most of us in first world countries have the luxury and the privilege of being in a place where we shouldn't be thinking constantly about the future, because every moment that you're thinking about the future, you're not fully appreciating now. Every single second that your brain is spinning around something that may or may not happen tomorrow or next week or next month or next year is a second that you cannot be appreciating what is happening to you and around you right now. So with that in mind, quick background. I've always been a little bit of an artist. I never made my living as an artist, but I've done multiple artistic things. Most of my life, my main artistic outlet has been writing. I've written a novel. I've written tons of short stories. I've written a lot of poetry, even in volumes that I have on my shelf. So writing was always a primary outlet for me. I've always appreciated writing in other forms as well. I love reading. I even love, like with films, I enjoy the scripts. I can say, wow, that film was really well written, or not so much. Same thing with television, etc. So writing has always been very important to me. Writing also has a feel of kind of a semi-permanence to it. Meaning, for example, I published a novel. The novel, I like to joke, has been read by literally dozens of people, but it's on Amazon. You can go on Amazon and you can find the book. And this novel, I have copies on my shelf. Now, I realize that 50 years from now, or even 10 years from now, maybe nobody will have a copy of the book. I don't know. But having a physical book, or having a physical notebook in which you've written your things, or having some printouts of the short stories that you've written, or whatever, I know that's not permanent in a true cosmic sense. But there is a chance that anything you've written that is in a physical form may be preserved after you're dead. It may be preserved for a decade or two. It may be preserved for centuries. It could even be preserved for millennia, although I realize there's a really small chance of that. But it has a semi-permanent feel to it, because you write something, but you can then put that writing into physical media, and you can hold it and you can feel it and you can put it on your shelf and you can say, I wrote that. Another thing that I do is that I paint. I'll throw some pictures up here about paintings I've done. I only started painting about 10 years ago, but painting also has this kind of semi-permanence to it. The same kind of permanence like writing, meaning I know that in theory, like right now, all my paintings are in my house. My house could burn to the ground tomorrow. And if it does, I'm sure that all my paintings will be gone. But there's a chance, assuming that my house doesn't burn down, that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, or even 100 years from now, my great grandkids might have my paintings on their walls, or great grandkids of my friends or something. Hell, 100 years from now or more, one of my paintings may even be in a museum. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But the point is that with proper conservation, some paintings can be around for millennia. Now, does that mean that my paintings will be anywhere in a physical form in millennia? Probably not, but it feels kind of permanent. You can touch it, you can feel it. Where am I going with this story? Well, some years ago, I started writing a new format. I started writing plays. If you've done writing, you might realize that a screenplay or a play is a very different kind of writing than writing a novel or a short story or a poem. You know, it's a whole different style, and you have to learn new tips and tricks. So to become a better playwright, I had to engage with the local theater groups. And I came to meet a lot of people that spend a lot of time in local theater. Now, when I say local theater, I'm not talking about regional theater. I'm not talking about repertory. I'm talking about the local theater groups. These are people, stage hands and stage directors and such, and theater administrators and directors, and of course, actors who put in tons of time and effort to put on these plays that are sometimes seen by 100 people or less. If it's a local theater with a good following, maybe it gets seen over a couple weeks by 400 or 500 people. That would be a pretty good run for most local theaters. But usually it's a total audience in the low hundreds. And usually the run of a given production spans no more than 2 weeks. Like, let's say 10 performances tops. And it might be far less than that. And in order to do these performances, they have to put in incredible amounts of time and effort. They have to memorize these plays, their lines. And sometimes if you have a major part, you may have a lot of lines to memorize. They have to go to rehearsals. They have to build stages and sets. They have to sell tickets. I mean, local theater is a lot of work. And yet, after this small, brief, local run happens of this production, it's done. All of that effort, all of that work just kind of goes off into the ether, never to be seen again. One night when we were testing one of my plays, by testing, I mean we were doing a living room read of my play. So there were a bunch of local actors in my living room reading through the parts of my would-be play. And afterwards, we're on the porch having some beers, and I'm talking to one of the actors, and he was a really good actor. And I started telling him that I had so much respect for what they do, but it was a little confusing to me. And my confusion, my problem in processing this was that my art forms had what I always felt were that kind of semi-permanence. Not permanent in the cosmic scale, but permanent in the sense that I could pick up a book I'd written, or I could look at the painting that I painted, and I could touch it, and I could feel it, and I could re-experience it anytime I wanted to. And yet these people involved in the production of local theater, they're putting in all this time and this effort, this blood, sweat, and tears for something that is the opposite of permanent. It will last only for the number of shows that they produce, and then it goes away. And I was just having a nice conversation with this actor on my porch, and I was telling him that as much as I love what they do, sometimes it's very confusing to me because I don't know how it is that you guys do this. How is it that you put in all this effort and this time, and you spend so much effort trying to get the lines right and the staging right and all this just for something that goes away? And his answer, I'll never forget, because he didn't refute anything I'd said. He just turned it right back around on me. And he said, exactly. It goes away. It's a temporary thing. And that's what makes it amazing. And I had to stop because he'd really set me back in my tracks when he said that. He didn't try to tell me, well, no, it's kind of permanent in your memories, or it's kind of permanent because you keep the programs from the shows or something. Like, no, he said, no, you're absolutely right. It's a temporary performance that you will never experience again. And instead of trying to refute that, he just seized onto that and said, that's what makes it special. It is special because it's ephemeral. And that to me was amazing. Musicians really would have a very similar thing. Now, I know musicians can have like a music video that they make that you could see many years in the future, and they could make a CD or an album or whatever, and you could have that many years in the future. But their performances, their live performances, every time that you go to a concert for some band or performer that you love, that is an ephemeral experience. And on some level, using my same logic from before, you could say, well, what's the point? What's the point of going through this process of learning the musical parts and practicing, rehearsing, and figuring out what the venue will be like, all that, just for a performance that might last no more than a couple hours? What's the point on the part of the audience, or what's the point on the part of the performer? Now, I guess you could say from the performer's perspective, you could say, well, if they make money, that's a really good reason. But there are some times when people make very little or no money for these performances, just like the local theater groups that I was talking about. Usually, if you're in local theater, you're making very little, and quite frankly, a lot of them make zero. A lot of them aren't paid a dime for their entire performance, and yet they do it anyway, and yet it's completely ephemeral. And there are musicians sometimes who will get together and they will jam and they will put on this cool impromptu performance, and they may not be getting paid a dime, or they may be getting paid only in a handful of tips, and yet they still do it and people still stop and watch it. Why do we do these things? And of course, the answer that I believe exists is because it's not about the permanence of it. Yes, permanence or semi-permanence can add a lot of value to certain things. Like, you wouldn't want to buy a house if it was going to go away the day after you bought it, right? Some things, many things in life only have value because they are semi-permanent. But there are some things that are completely ephemeral that have massive value because they're ephemeral. That is actually a huge part of what lends them value. Now, what's the point of this whole story? To me, this has massive implications on life itself. To me, a huge part of my sense of meaning and purpose in life doesn't come from whether or not I feel like I'm going to get to heaven. It doesn't come from whether or not I think I'm going to get to worship God for the rest of my life, or whether I'm going to be singing with the angels. A huge part of the enjoyment and worth that I feel in this life comes exactly from the fact that I think it's finite. I think it's going to end probably pretty soon. I don't have cancer or anything, but you know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things, I mean, I have more years behind me already than I have in front. Even if I live to be very old, I'm already past the halfway point. That's easily true. And I'm probably a good ways past the halfway point. And don't be wrong, I'd like to have more years than whatever I'm going to have. If you said I'm going to live to be 70, I'd like to be 80. If you said I'm going to live to be 80, I'd like to be 90, and on and on. But I do think that there is incredible value in knowing that this life is finite and it's all you have. And that imbues my life every day with so much meaning. One thing I want to mention really quickly too, in the story that I tell about the performances and performance art, whether it's local theater, whether it's musicians, etc. I know one of the common answers that you get from this is that, well, but memory, that's the value that you get from it. And memory feels semi-permanent. And I'd say, okay, maybe. First of all, memory is very, very problematic. Let's say that. And there are a lot of things that you may have thought you'd remember forever, but you may have gone to a concert 30 years ago that you barely remember now. But let's say that memory is a big part of what negates the ephemeral thing for you. Fine. But let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that your spouse suffered an accident and now has retrograde amnesia. And if you're not sure what that is, it's like the movie Memento, the people that can't form new permanent memories. So like every day they wake up, it's like they're restarting the day essentially, right? And let's say that your spouse with this retrograde amnesia also has a deep love of live jazz. And that maybe you live in my neighborhood in New Orleans and you could walk a few blocks to Frenchman Street to hear amazing live jazz any night of the week. Now, you know that your spouse loves live jazz. It makes him happy. You also know that tomorrow he won't remember anything that you've done today. So here's my question. Knowing that he won't remember the experience, would you ever walk him up to the bar on Frenchman 3 blocks from your house to take him to go see live jazz, knowing that he won't remember it tomorrow, but that he would be very, very happy to see it today? I would say that you'd probably take them up there at least every once in a while, even if you know that they won't remember it tomorrow. Knowing that they are experiencing that joy and enjoying that music in the moment still, in my humble opinion, has a deep, visceral value to it. It doesn't apply to everyone. Some people would say there's no value to that. Some people would say, if I don't know I'm going to heaven, then my life here has no purpose. And if you're that person, I can't talk you off that ledge, nor do I want to. But I would also argue to you that the meaning of life doesn't just have to be tied to what happens after it's done. There is a tremendous amount from living life that imbues life with meaning as we're living it. And that to me is incredibly important. It's incredibly valuable. I'm sure that when I'm on my deathbed, I'll be sad because I'll want to live longer. But I don't sit around right now and bemoan the idea that I won't be going to some beatific afterlife. No, I'm going out trying to do everything that I can with this life today. Now, is this going to solve your existential problems if you're an atheist or even a Christian who isn't sure what the meaning of life is? No. Is this going to draw you out of nihilism if you have fallen down that pit? No, I'm sure my anecdote is not going to save you. I don't know if this anecdote is going to do anyone any good, but I wanted to share this with people because this idea that meaning of life and purpose in life can only come from a religion, or specifically from a theistic religion, or more specifically from Yahweh and Christianity, is quite frankly stupid. Now, if you get your meaning and your purpose from your Christianity, then great. I'm happy for you. But the idea that that's the only place, the only way that you can feel fulfilled in this life is just downright stupid and short-sighted. And it just shows a complete lack of knowledge of the totality of the human experience. My ideas on time, for example, won't apply to most. If I try to tell you that your past doesn't exist and your future doesn't exist, you'll probably think I'm a little crazy. If I try to tell you that your life has meaning because you heard some great music this afternoon, you might think that I'm a little crazy. But I am telling you that there are more ways to look at this thing other than, oh, what am I going to do in the afterlife? I hope that this has been of some interest to some of you, maybe even a little helpful to some of you. Let me know in the comments if I have missed something, if there's something that you feel adds a lot of value to life that I have not covered. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. Thank you for joining me. This has been another episode of Cynical Sermons. I normally say that if I've screwed anything up, I'd like to give a chance for Yahweh to chime in, but you know what? I don't give a shit. I don't care what his views are on this. I feel very fulfilled. Thank you to all of our members. Thank you to those who like and subscribe and leave comments below. I hope to see you all on future videos, but until I do, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.